want to add my happy Mother's Day to all of you. It's good to be in worship together on this special day. I want us to think this morning about communities and covenants. Communities and covenants. We all participate in a number of communities. We all are part of a number of covenants. And in our text for today, we see the very earliest church coming together in covenant with one another as a community. And the way in which they came together, the way in which they were a community, and what they did for one another, with one another, and for the larger community made a great difference. And people were added to their number day by day because so attractive was that community and so important was that covenant that they had made, that people wanted to be a part of that. So I want us to think about our covenants and our communities this morning. We have many of them. You are a member of several communities, the church community, your neighborhood community, your community of friends, your community of your immediate family, spouse, children, parents, a community of extended family, a community perhaps that is a civic club or some other organization, a lot of communities. And if you begin to think about your participation in those communities, every one of them, whether it is a formal covenant, like a marriage, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, and so forth, a stated covenant, or an unstated covenant, whether it's a stated covenant like, will you be loyal to the church and uphold it by your prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness, or an unstated covenant where you have an understanding with that community. You have a lot of covenants as well. Those covenant relationships, marriages, parenthood, friendships, covenant with employers, employees, on and on. Covenant with organizations you're a part of. Some neighborhoods actually have neighborhood covenants that function in a certain way. You're a part of many covenants. And of course, chief among those is your covenant with God. And God made a covenant with the people of God. God makes a covenant with us, includes us in that covenant in Jesus Christ. I will be your God, you will be my people. The covenant is stated that way over and over again in Scripture. We have a lot of covenants. So I want us to think about those together this morning. First is this notion of the community of the church and its importance. It was so attractive to those who first saw the people relating to one another in that way. It says in the book of Acts that they were awed by that and they wanted to be a part of that community. There's something really attractive about a community of people who care for one another, who challenge one another, who will say the truth to one another, and will be able to hear that and be able to encourage and support one another in difficult times. That's what community is about. So important is that community that it is attractive to people that you wouldn't even think about it being attractive to. I have a friend I met just a few years ago who is an atheist. In fact, he's not just an atheist in a private sort of way, but he's really an activist in the sort of circles of atheism, if you will. But he goes to church a lot. He visits churches. And occasionally we'll have lunch and we'll talk about things that are going on in our lives. And I asked him, why do you go to church? In fact, I said to him, you go to church more than some of my church members go to church. Why do you go to church so much? And it was interesting because he said, I like church people. I like the way they care for one another. Do you hear it? The attractiveness of community. He said, I like the things that church people do when they get together. I like that they do things for other people. I like the way they give. Interesting, huh? In fact, he appreciates community so much that he was one of the founders of a community in Dallas that is an atheist community. And they worship. No, they don't worship. Sorry, that's the wrong word. They gather once a month on a Sunday morning. And I said, really, what do you do? He said, I'll send you a video of it. And so he sent a video, and it was intriguing. I mean, somebody stood up, welcomed everybody. They greeted one another. There were some announcements. Somebody spoke. There was a band. They sang some songs. And they even had a problem with their sound system. And I thought, wow, this is a lot like church. Strange. But on the other hand, it says something about the power of community, and that he visits churches because it's attractive to him. Interesting, isn't it? Community is really a powerful thing, and when it is a Christian community, a community of people who care for one another, who challenge one another to grow in their faith, who encourage one another and comfort one another, and all of those one another's that Christian communities do. It is indeed a powerful thing that even helps shape who we are and who we will become. Think of it a moment ago, as we do with every baptism, we agreed to be a part of a child's life in helping to shape and nurture a child in the faith, the power of community. Jim Moore tells the story that occurred at the University of Wisconsin many years ago, when a group of students at the university, all men, who were writers and interested in literary pursuit, they formed an organization, and their purpose was to critique one another's work. Somebody would read something that he had written, the others would critique it. But the critique really became criticism, and then it became harsh criticism, and then it became downright mean and vicious in tearing one another's work apart. So much so that they nicknamed their group the Stranglers. The Stranglers. Another group came into existence after that, and they called themselves the Wranglers. This was a group of women who gathered for the same purpose, that is, to read something and to learn from one another and critique their work. And they were honest in their critique, positive and negative. But the difference was they were encouraging and supportive, and they wanted to help one another be better and be confident in their work. 20 years later, another student studied those two groups. And the interesting thing is, that student looked at where were those people now? What had happened to the ones who had participated in those two groups that had the same purpose but operated very differently? And the interesting thing is, he could not find one member of the Stranglers that was prominent in literature, had made a name at all for himself. Yet there were half dozen Wranglers who had great success in their literary pursuits. The difference of supportive community. The difference of a real community in which people challenge one another, in which they speak honestly to one another, and yet encourage and support and make better. That's the power of community. And when we're in covenant together to be that community as a church, we can accomplish great, great things together. So much more can happen when a community functions together in covenant than we can accomplish as individuals. And the early church is a great example of that. God did many signs and wonders, it says, through that early community. They did much as they pooled their resources and they worked together so much that everyone recognized the good that they were doing and wanted to be a part of that. The power of community to do great things, greater things than we can do by ourselves. And if you think about the ministries that we do as a local church, that other churches do as those communities work together, is much more than any one person could do by himself or by herself. The power of community to shape and to mold and to help grow and encourage, the power of community to accomplish great things. This was true of the early church. It's true, as a matter of fact, of the church today. And at the heart of that is the covenant that inspires and motivates and holds people together as they do their work. And speaking of doing great things, then there is that larger community and our responsibility there. There is an old Talmudic legend. Two men are in a boat. They're rowing toward the shore, and one man begins to drill a hole in the bottom of the boat. The other one says, "What are you doing? We'll sink." And he said, "This is none of your business. I'm drilling the hole under my own seat." Well, it's everybody's business, isn't it? And so when we are in covenant with our larger community, when we are in covenant with God who calls us to be in a kind of covenant with all of our brothers and sisters, then it's everybody's business. And so it's not just a matter of agreeing to nurture a child being baptized in our community of faith, but it is that kind of covenant to be responsible for and caring for all of the children of our community. Back in the 1990s, I became acquainted firsthand with the work of the Search Institute. The Search Institute identified through its exhaustive studies that in order for a child or youth to have success, they have to have in place certain community assets. And they identified 40 assets. And so what was so wonderful about this was, instead of saying, we need to do better for our children need to be more successful or something like that, which is so vague you can't get a handle on it, they identified here are 40 assets that a child needs. And the more assets a child has, then the more successful and secure and confident that child will be. And so the whole community, the parents, the educators, the religious communities, the government, civic leaders of all kinds, came together to learn what are those assets, what piece of that can I affect and my community affect, and how can we build the assets in our community. And so we measured the assets. We tried to put into place all kinds of ways to be able to measure the assets a particular child has and to be able to build up the assets in the life of that child. What a difference. But at the heart of all that is this covenant with one another that we will take responsibility for our community and for the children in it. And at the heart of that, then, is this community of people that came together to make a difference in the lives of kids. Covenants and communities, they make a huge difference. And the challenge for us is, because we're part of so many communities and so many covenants, is what happens when two of those covenants are in sort of conflict? What happens if we have to choose among those covenants? This is the question that a professor of mine, Joseph Allen, raised when I was a seminary student. And he was working on a book. He's an ethicist, working on a book about covenant ethics. That is, when you face some ethical decision, what are the covenants that you're a part of, and what do those covenants demand of you? And what do you do if there are disagreements among the covenants? Your covenant as a father or a mother, for example, is in conflict with that covenant as an employee, just as an example. How do you sort all of that out. And it's a challenge. But at the heart of that is you and I making the decision, what is the most important among our covenants? It's those close ones, isn't it? Our covenant with God, our covenant with our immediate family, and our covenant with our friends. Those are important. And they take precedence if we're paying attention to what is most important. There is a legend that persists to this day among those who are climbers of Mount Shasta. It actually happened. It was on a climb that a man began to have some sort of cardiac respiratory distress, and it looked pretty serious. And they were very concerned, and they were trying to get him back down the mountain when there was a huge snowstorm, and they wound up in hastily erected tents waiting it out. Many wondered if he might die. He was in pretty serious distress. There was in the tent where he was a satellite phone, and he asked the person with the satellite phone to make a call. Many assumed when he made the request that he would ask for them to call his family, someone close to him. But no, he wanted the person to call his broker. And the story is still told to this day because everyone was astounded at this, and this is my language, misplaced ordering of covenants. So the question for you and for me is, what's most important for us? What covenants are we going to really nurture, and which ones take precedence when there is tension among those covenants? Back in 1994, Barbara Bush gave the commencement address at Wellesley College. In that address, she said this to the students: you're going to be doctors, lawyers, business people, and you're going to have a lot of commitments. And those commitments are going to be important. But she said, your commitment as spouse or parent or friend is more important. She used the word commitment. We could think about covenant and finish her thought. She said to the group, when it's all said and done, you will look back and you will not regret the deal that you weren't able to make. You will not regret that business decision that kind of went wrong. She said, what regrets you will have and what yearning you will have to do with those, my word again, covenants that are most important: spouse, children, friends. She's right. They are the most important. And our children, on this day particularly, as we're thinking about our mothers and our families, we think about the importance of that covenant of the family together. And I want to read to you something that a woman named Cindy Coulter put together. Cindy Coulter was a member of the church in Georgetown where I served, and she was an elementary school counselor. Every year, she asked the first and second graders, now think about that, first and second graders, these are young ones, one survey question. And the question was, if you could make one suggestion for moms and dads that would help them be better parents, what would it be? She was telling me about this survey after she'd been doing it about 4 years at that time, and I said, I would love a copy of your compilation of those responses, and she gave it to me. And some of them bring a chuckle. Don't feed us broccoli, one kid wrote. Don't worry so much. Don't wake up on the wrong side of the bed. If we don't eat all of our food, don't make us sit there until we eat it. I wish my parents could jump rope good, one of the kids wrote. This one's interesting. You wonder what the backstory is. To Mom, please don't dance on the table. You could break a leg, your other leg. But of all the suggestions, the ones that appeared time and time and time again are not so funny. They're the ones that have to do with the priority of covenants. They're the ones that have to do with the most precious commodity, and that is time, and how we spend and invest that, and how parents do. It's about literally being present. Now listen to some of these things. First and second graders wrote, Mom, please read me a bedtime story. Dad, please hug me. I wish they would pay more attention to me. I wish my dad would play with me more often. Stop and relax. Play with me more. I wish you would spend more time with me. Tuck me in at night and read me bedtime stories. Play with me. I think they need to spend more time with me than the computer. If my parents would stop watching television, for my dad to come home before I go to bed, relax and play as a family. I would like for my mom and dad to teach us about the Bible and to listen to us. Out of the mouths of babes, a challenge to pay attention to the most important communities and covenants that we have. I want to close with a story that comes out of East Africa. It is a tradition in one of the East African tribes for the whole community to be a part of a child's life. And what's interesting is they see life beginning not at the birth of the child, as it is in many cultures, not at conception, as it is in many cultures, but the life of the child begins with the first thought of the mother when she thinks about having a child. The child's life begins then, they believe. The mother goes off by herself in a secluded place where there are no distractions, and she sits and she listens. And what she's listening for is a song that will be given to her, and it will be this child's song. She sits and she listens until she hears the song. And then when she hears it, she learns it. She goes back to the village. She teaches it to her husband. And as the baby is conceived, they sing the song together. She teaches it to the matriarchs of the village, the elder women of the village, to the midwives. And when the child is born, they all sing the song of the child in celebration. The whole time she's expecting the child, she sings the child's song daily to the child in the womb. The whole village then learns the song. And every time there's a rite of passage, they all sing the song for this child. Any major event in the life of the child, they sing that person's song. And as they grow up, they hear the song, they hear the whole community singing it, and they know it's their song. When the end comes, at the funeral, they sing the song. I think it's a beautiful way of illustrating community and covenant. The whole community comes together and says, this is our child. This is our person. We're in covenant with one another. This person is so unique, they have their own song. And all through life, no matter what happens, we're in covenant together. We are a community, and we all will sing that song. It's my prayer for you and for me that we might just have a taste of that anyway. The importance of those communities, and especially the ones that are primary to us, and the importance of the covenants we make. May we go from this place in covenant with God to be God's people in the world, and in covenant with one another to be community, to give life to our community, and to live in covenant together. Amen.